Greetings once again from New Jersey. It is Saturday night. It is Revolutionary Change, and this is Pontificating with Pete. Hope you're doing well, guys. It's always great to have you all here at the start. Make sure that you smash that like button. Make sure that you share the stream. Make sure that you are subscribed, and make sure you click that bell. As you know, we are fighting that algorithm, and any help that it can be provided is certainly appreciated. So welcome to the show. Tonight, we obviously have a lot of different places to cover, but when we talk about the importance of what this channel represents, what it's supposed to, the message we're supposed to convey, when we talk about revolutionary change and the importance of what that message actually means, when it involves the coalescing of a lot of different aspects of the political arena. We obviously covered, as you guys probably saw earlier, the clip this afternoon regarding Norm Finkelstein and Tucker Carlson, probably two of the most important voices on both the left and the right, respectively, especially on the issue of Israel, and the importance of being able to put differences aside in lieu of what is going on right now. And I say this because I want to emphasize the importance of the average American fully embracing this revolutionary moment, because that is what we're living through. And it is growing leaps and bounds by the day. And we know this because while I don't look at one specific poll as anything other than an outlier, the norm of consistency regarding where the United States and its citizenry feels as of this moment regarding the state of Israel could not be more obvious, that we are moving in a direction away from supporting that country to the point in which the support will no longer exist in the not too distant future. Unfortunately, because of the fact that from a conscious perspective, the average American no longer wants anything to do with Israel. What that also means is that the powers that be have a choice. They're either going to adhere to the will of the people, or they're going to continue to double, triple, quadruple, and then some down on what they believe is the necessary direction that this country should be going in from this K-shaped economy that's broken beyond recognition at this point. And so with that said, despite all of the data that we are seeing, despite all of the information that has been presented to us in terms of how this country truly feels about the state of Israel, we are now faced with this reality about not only Israel, but the data centers that are popping up all over this country. So the piece that I wrote, which is a relatively short piece, but it's to the point, and it kind of covers a lot of the ground of what we were talking about, is going to follow what Colin, let's do the Instagram post first so we can sort of lay the foundation and then we can run into the story. And so here is what is the current state of affairs regarding this Section 224 of what would be the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. So Colin, can I please have what I requested? I need the Instagram story. Congress quietly moves to integrate U.S. and Israeli militaries. So if you can't convince the people to support this initiative, what's the next best thing? You just go behind their backs and don't tell them about it. Buried in the House's version of the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, released on Tuesday, is Section 224 entitled United States-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. The provision would arguably do more to intertwine the U.S. military and the Israeli military than more than the $200 billion that we're aware of in military assistance Israel has received from the U.S. since its founding in 1948. Section 224 lays the groundwork for bilateral research and development, co-production of weapons, joint ventures, licensing agreements, and seemingly every manner of the U.S. military-industrial complex cooperation. The U.S. and Israel already work together heavily on missile defense, but this provision would greatly expand coordination to seemingly every area of defense tech, including AI, quantum, autonomous systems, directed energy, cyber biotech, and much more. It also proposes network integration and data fusion. In other words, the U.S. military's data could soon be the Israeli military's data. Not soon, but will be. If fully enacted, this proposal would provide a higher level of military-industrial integration than the U.S. has with any other country in the world. To be sure, the U.S. has worked closely with its NATO partners on co-production and shared supply chains, most notably via the Defense Production Action Plan. And as the number one arms dealer in the world, of course we are, the U.S. provides weapons to militaries across the globe. But that is mostly a one-way street, with the U.S. providing weapons to foreign buyers who only occasionally make parts for those weapons themselves, as in the case of the F-35's global supply chain. Section 224 would be a different beast entirely. It would fuse the U.S. and Israeli defense sectors in multiple areas vital to the battlefields of the future, like autonomous systems and cyber. It would also bring extraordinary Israeli influence to the U.S. beyond what is already, and through the Israel lobby and its robust network of social media influencers. It would give the Israeli government the opportunity to greatly expand one of the most powerful levers of influence in U.S. politics: jobs in the U.S. And that's the big one. You know, we've seen over the years, I always point to Elizabeth Warren being the biggest hypocrite of them all, because this is a person who claims to be on the side of not being part of the war machine. And yet, when it comes to jobs, especially defense jobs, they're a very big part of the Massachusetts economy. And she is fully on board with that. So we're going to also get to Bernie shortly, and you'll see why. So this is a huge part of it. The jobs program is often what gets people to shut up, because if the economy becomes so dependent on this idea that if we do not go along to get along because it would affect our economic balance, this is how they get away with crimes against humanity, war crimes. They just integrate it seamlessly into our economy that we don't see. But remember, this is coming up for a vote, and you're going to be able to know who's on your side and who's on the side of not only forever war, but prefers Israel over the United States. By expanding or starting new co-production facilities like it already has in Mississippi and Arkansas, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, what is the common thread amongst the two states, Arkansas and Mississippi? They happen to be two of the three poorest states in the country, along with West Virginia. So why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because it basically drives this unholy alliance together in a sense that when you have two states like Mississippi and Arkansas that are desperate for any type of commerce, they're getting it through the military-industrial complex, and they sure as hell are not going to complain about it. If this is going to produce jobs, it's going to create some type of an economic whirlwind that is positive for these two states in particular. Then everything else be damned. You put people in desperate situations, they are going to go down this road. And so, it is thereby securing allies among members of Congress who represent the districts whose jobs where those jobs lie. So this is a tale as old as time. This has been going on forever. It's how you keep people in line. Jobs, baby. We don't ask how the jobs got there. We don't even ask what the jobs do. We just ask, are they going to pay a living wage? Good. Then all other questions are not relevant. The result could well be a U.S. political system even more susceptible to the whims of an Israeli government that seemingly has no qualms about drawing the U.S. into military conflicts in the Middle East. The unprecedented level of U.S.-Israeli military integration stands in stark contrast to the traditional air model of defense cooperation, in which Israel already stood out as the top recipient of U.S. military assistance, as laid out in a recent Quincy Institute brief, authored by one of us, Steve Simon. This shift from an aid model to a military integration model has troubling implications. Namely, the shift will strip away the political and diplomatic oversight mechanisms that make the relationship publicly accountable, moving it from a visible annual aid vote into the opaque machinery of defense acquisition, where oversight is limited and political accountability is minimal. The result would be a defense relationship that is simultaneously deeper and less transparent. This all comes at a time when the Israeli military has repeatedly used U.S. weapons in strikes that have violated international humanitarian laws in Gaza. And as Israel has repeatedly violated ceasefires, what ceasefire? As says the U.S. itself, in the Trump administration's unnecessary war with Iran. And now we know for sure why the war with Iran is even happening. So the enormous gulf between what most Americans want and what the president is doing when it comes to Israel and what Congress is proposing here should not be ignored. Just 30% of respondents to a New York Times Siena poll from mid-May believes Trump made the right decision to go to war with Iran, with 64% saying it was wrong. An Institute for Global Affairs poll released earlier this week dove even deeper into the American psyche when it comes to arming Israel, finding that just 16% say the U.S. should keep supplying Israel with weapons without new restrictions. 38% want to stop supplying weapons entirely, and another 24% want weapons conditioned on how they're used. Fat chance. Yet mainstream leadership in both parties remains largely pro-Israel and continues to shape the base legislative test before amendments and broader congressional debate open to the full body, as in the case with this NDAA provision. Though slowly, tides within both parties are shifting as more and more members speak out against the growing divide between Israel's actions and Americans' interests. For example, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland wrote in the New York Times on Tuesday that the Democratic Party has provided reflexive and unconditional support to Israeli governments, even as their actions have increasingly undermined American interests and values. On the Republican side of the aisle, Representative Thomas Massie and former Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene have openly decried the Israel, that appears to have cut off there. But what can other members of Congress who are concerned about Israel's destabilizing actions do right now? Stop the Israeli-U.S. military-industrial merger in its tracks. Lawmakers should reject Section 224 from the NDAA to avoid deep integration with Israel's military at a time when a growing number of Americans oppose Israel's actions in the region. Now, what are the odds of something like that happening? The odds are extremely low. And as I wrote in my Substack that you guys can check out at substack.com/@revolutionary-change, and Colin, if you can cue that one up real quick so that people can see, I'm going to show them the basic rundown of what we put together. There is another little hidden caveat to this affair that a lot of people are probably not aware of. The secret U.S.-Israel alliance via AI data centers. And if you scroll down on that picture so people can see, and this is from Roya English, over 12,000 U.S. citizens currently serve in the Israeli military. Now, here's the big question. Are these American soldiers being conscripted to serve for the state of Israel? Or is it even more sinister? Are these American citizens showing loyalty to the state of Israel over the United States? Perhaps it's both. But if we know for sure that there are 12,000 American soldiers in uniform serving on behalf of the IDF, that's a big problem. A huge problem. In fact, it's a borderline treasonous problem, if not outright treason. And we should all know this. So there shouldn't be any secrets here. And as I've pointed out, since there's a number of kind of crossover points here, but since the outset of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, the public opinion regarding our country's support for the Zionist state has taken a dramatic turn from majority positive to overwhelmingly negative. And according to that latest poll, only 16% still support providing unconditional military aid. Now, as a result of the economic and environmental devastation they are leaving in their wake, public opinion is dramatically turning against AI data centers. So how is our government choosing to respond to the will of the people? Secretly merge the U.S. and Israeli militaries technologically via Section 224 of the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act. So this provision would synchronize the two military networks through data fusion. That is using the emerging AI data centers. So that's where the connection between Israel and the data centers are being shown in full view of everyone. That's the big connection here. This is the part of the story that cannot be ignored. In fact, it's one of the most important developments that we have ever seen. So when you have the likes of Larry Fink at BlackRock coming out and explicitly saying, you will not mess with our data centers, now you're understanding why. The importance of this merging of the relationship, the corporate with the military state as one and the same, that is effectively what is happening here and why these AI data centers are becoming such a critical talking point to our daily lives. Just as we point out constantly, the importance of remembering that Israel and the State Department's alliance is the primary driver for foreign policy around the world. When it comes to domestic policy, there is nothing more significant in this moment than these AI data centers. Now we know that they're one and the same. And that should not come as any surprise. The provision will also expand weapons manufacturing for Israel in Mississippi and Arkansas, as was pointed out in the other article. This defense jobs program would create even more undue influence for the Israel lobby over our government and its elected officials. That's the way it's always done. And that's the way it will continue to be done. If you tie in economic dependency through foreign policy, even if it's the state of Israel, as I've often said, this is the biggest reason why people keep their mouths shut when it comes to the genocide. Not that people generally like Israelis. I think we can all safely say that they are the most unlikable people, and we've got a very fun story later this evening you will love about the Israelis. What you have to remember is that when it is all tied to the economic dependency of our collapsing empire, this is where they are able to get away with what they get away with. Not because necessarily everybody agrees with what's going on, but because it is painfully obvious that this is what economic dependency really looks like when you have no leg to stand on. So that's essentially what we're dealing with here. And it's a pretty big problem. So we will now see that despite 3 out of 4 Americans outright rejecting war with Iran, it is easy to see now why the supermajority will of the people is being rejected in favor of renewed bombing of Tehran, which, as you all know, commenced once again over the last 48 hours. Keep coming down, scrolling, Colin. With over 12,000 troops fulfilling active military duty on behalf of Israel, it is easy to surmise how much further this regional war could expand should the Trump administration actually follow through on re-implementing the draft. When Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu Milikowski was recently prompted at an Israeli town hall about the state's next plans for Gaza, he simply said, "We now control 60% of the land. Soon it will be 70%. The crowd, unprompted, burst into a chant of 100%, indicating that the intention was always to colonize the entire strip as well as vast swaths of the region, hence Greater Israel. The only way this will not happen is if the American people rise up and force the severing of this relationship with Israel forever. Does your congressional representative support Section 224? Find out now before it's too late." This is primarily why we say that revolution or nothing is the path we are heading towards. Because again, it doesn't matter what we say, what we think, or how we lean on our federally elected representatives. It is an unfortunate tragedy that we have come to this point. And there is no question that this is exactly what we had coming for ourselves because of the fact that we did not nip this in the bud a long time ago. And as much as it pains me to have to bring up the son of Vermont, we have to reach a point where it is an unforgivable form of discourse if you are on board with the state of Israel in any capacity. And this is obviously going to cover a couple of layers here because, as I have mentioned, Jen has mentioned, the inherent danger of how liberal America is framing what is going on here when it comes to how they are going to continue to garner support for the state of Israel, continue to be funded by the Zionist entity, but convince enough people that they can get away with it. This is a it's a sad moment. It is. Because again, liberal Zionism is infinitely more dangerous than conservative Zionism because you want to see the wolf. You don't want the wolf in sheep's clothing. A lot of people can see one way of this being done. When you have somebody as detestable as Randy Fine, for example, saying the things that he says, stating the course that Israel should be on, that's unfortunate. But then you have somebody like Senator Sanders, who was supposed to be on the right side of history, who's supposed to be doing the right thing for humanity. And instead, this is how he responds on Al Jazeera Plus.
Among Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and Gaza are showing that they're increasingly in favor of a one-state solution with equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians alike and equal citizenship. Is that something you believe could happen, or is that something you support?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if that happens, then that would be the end of the state of Israel.
And unfortunately, I support the state of Israel, even though I know it's not very popular. But I have to say, the state of Israel, it's been good to me. And I lived on a kibbutz, and it was a good time. And now I think it's definitely necessary to continue it. All I'm going to do, which I have continued to do for the longest time, is continue to point the finger at Netanyahu and his government, the people of Israel, even though they're even more crazy than Netanyahu. We'll forgive them because we'll just put in a better government. Better people will be in charge, and then it won't be such a problem. No, Bernie, it is a problem. It's a legacy-defining problem, whether you like it or not. All the hard work that you've put in, the millions of people that you inspired, it's all for naught because you can't get right on this issue. And sometimes it's only one issue. One issue can define them all. And this, to me, is the issue that will define you. You need to answer this very critical question, Bernie Sanders. What makes you better than Randy Fine or Debbie Wasserman Schultz when it comes to the issue of Israel if you believe in the genocidal state? You really think a two-state solution is going to solve this problem? You really think that at this point you can't see what's going on here? Are you that much in denial? I mean, I understand you were born, in the Stone Age, but at some point you have to evolve. At some point you either have to get with reality or get out of the way. And this is going to be a critical issue for anybody in the Democratic Party who even thinks about running for president in 2028. Because let me tell you right now, what is going to happen in the GOP? Either Thomas Massie or Tucker Carlson are going to run for president on a libertarian-esque America First agenda that is against Israel, full stop. Where do you think the populist energy is going to go? It sure as hell is not going to go to you or to AOC or to Ro Khanna or anyone else that even attempts to split the difference, because there is no splitting of the difference. This is also why when they come out and vehemently reject the idea of having any support from AIPAC, that's just a distraction. If you're not talking about the Israel lobby in its totality, yes, I said Randy Swine. You see, Bernie, you're going to end up just like this. This is your legacy if you continue down this road. In fact, I don't even think at this point you could not end up down this road, because to be this far along and to get this that wrong, completely wrong, is unacceptable beyond words. And don't think for a second this hasn't been going on for a while. But let Bernie finish out, and then we'll take it a step further.
And I support Israel's right to exist.
You do support Israel's right to exist, Bernie. And it's not like you haven't made this point clear before. Here he is a few months ago.
And critical of Benjamin Netanyahu for a very long time. But I want to ask you just about something that sometimes gets lost, especially right now when this debate is so emotional and so raw, which is, especially on the left, which is take Netanyahu out of this. Do you believe in the notion of Israel as a Jewish state?
Yeah. I do. For a lot of reasons.
Well, those reasons that I could come up with have nothing to do with whether or not the American people will ever understand, because the Jewish people, they are persecuted and they're not having a very good time. It's unfortunate, but, if we don't have a Jewish state, then where are the Jews supposed to go to be safe? I don't know, Bernie. You were born before 1948. And apparently, everything is always about what happened after the fact. You never address the fact that Dana Bash is one of the... Dana Bash, Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper, they're all Jewish Zionists. And they're all employed by CNN. You see, when Fox News does it, everybody sees it coming. Because they're crude, they're inhumane, they don't care. So it's a much bigger problem. I want to give credit to somebody that we don't cross paths that much anymore politically. Krystal Ball and I know each other personally. We've always gotten along very well. But unfortunately, she and her husband, Kyle Kulinski, have made a very conscious effort that they are going to support the Democratic Party. When push comes to shove, end all be all, they will still fall into the vote blue no matter who category, believing that that is whatever it is that they believe is the reason for doing it, that they think that that is the safety squeeze. It doesn't work, and it never will work. But with that being said, I do want to give Krystal credit for this clip, and I'll tell you why. So Jen and I have pointed this out time and time again on our channel. When it comes to AIPAC, and even though AIPAC is pretty much split between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in terms of the candidates that they support, publicly and privately, there is a perception that they are much more of a Republican-leading conservative organization. That is the perception of what AIPAC actually is. Now, with AIPAC, you see them coming. On the other hand, we are living in a situation where when we're dealing directly with J Street and many of these other pro-Israel NGOs, there is a inherent danger in allowing the type of rhetoric that you will hear from liberal Zionists, whether it is Bernie Sanders, whether it is the founder of J Street. And the other thing I obviously want to give Krystal credit for, even though we obviously have vehemently disagreed with her channel's decision to remove James Lee, Ryan Grimm with Drop Site News does great work. Got to give him credit. And so the two of them had an interview with this gentleman, Mr. Benjamin, who is the founder of J Street. Listen carefully to the language that they use.
Gets treated differently because Israel is an ally, right? That's the reason we won't sell defensive weapons or really do anything to protect Palestinians or Iranian civilians as we're bombing their little girls' schools, or Lebanese civilians. One of the questions that I think the American people are asking, and I'm asking, is what are we getting out of this relationship? I view this more through a moral lens. I think Israel's committing a genocide as an apartheid state. I think it should be sanctioned the way South Africa was. I think that level of pressure should be applied to compel moral behavior. I think we should have international law. I think our willingness to observe and support the barbarism of Israel in Gaza has effectively destroyed international law. What do we get out of Israel being this key ally, given the fact that Israel has helped persuade the president to enter into this disastrous war, given the fact that Israel has helped to destroy international law? Why are we holding so tight to this alliance with an actor that is not only immoral, but has helped to foment a massive strategic disaster for the United States of America and the globe?
Well, I think what you're hearing me say is that the U.S. shouldn't be having that kind of a relationship with an Israel that is doing the things that you're outlining. This Israel under Benjamin Netanyahu, the things that it has done over these last 20 years, by and large, they have hurt American national interests.
You see it from Bernie, You are seeing it from Mr. Benjamin. Now, we'll see if Krystal pushes back or not. But this is always going to be the liberal Zionist talking point. It is one that they see as politically strategic and that it will work for them. And in the short run, it probably will. That this is a Netanyahu problem. This is a Gvir problem. This is a Smotrich problem. This isn't an Israel problem. Israel still has the right to exist. And that's what they're going to go with. Now, do I think it'll work in the short run, especially being that this is a blue wave year? Probably. But in the long run, it will fail. We have to continue to point out that this is the next step in the pro-Israel strategy. They are 1,000% going to get behind the Democrats in the midterms, and this is how they're going to do it. They're just going to sell it a different way. That is what is going to happen here. A huge part of their strategy is going to be talking like this. He's got more to say.
Want to see is a Middle East that ends these conflicts, provides Palestinians with an actual route to self-determination that begins to tap into the incredible opportunity Israel provides to the region to be a technological and economic engine of growth. We call it a 23-state solution. Can Israel become a functioning member of the region and work with all of its neighbors? The type of Israel under Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and Smotrich that does what it did in Gaza, burning down the West Bank, fomenting religious warfare, convincing Donald Trump to go to war, that is not an asset to the United States, but it can be. When I say J Street is pro-Israel, we are advocating for a different future.
It just seems to me to require a sort of suspension of reality to imagine the Israel that you're talking about. For example, you said you expect there'll be a new government in place that isn't as extreme. Naftali Bennett, the critique he's had of Netanyahu with regard to the Iran war is that he wasn't brutal enough.
There is no reforming this genocidal state. There is no reforming this government. There is no reforming this ideology. It is a dead ideology in the eyes of anyone who is not just America first, but just an American period that has a brain. If you know anybody at this point that is still supporting the state of Israel, they are an enemy to the United States of America. And do not hold back on that statement. Do not, I don't care how scared people get if they hear that. This is our country and it is cratering and it will go down into the pits of hell with that genocidal state if we let them. They are trying to merge our military with theirs. How much worse can this get? Well, apparently it could get a lot worse. And the problem is that liberal Zios like Mr. Benjamin are going to try to soft sell it. That is what we are up against right now. The soft sell of Zionism in a kindler, gentler way. The Jews won't be safe without it. That's what they're trying to do. And unfortunately, for the short term, his style, especially with the amount of money that they're going to have behind them. Did you guys know that Mr. Senate candidate darling James Tallarico, who is the Democratic nominee for the U.S. Senate in the state of Texas, did you know he's already received $60,000 in campaign contributions from one of Miriam Adelson's NGOs? Well, now you know. As I said, and as Jenna said, we will not vote our way out of this. It won't happen. And if anything, the Democrats are going to create a sense of security around this issue for the more comfort-minded voter in this country. That once they're in charge, the adults will be in charge again, and things will go back to normal. There is no going back to normal. This is, we're done, period, end of story. Listen for more information that's critical here.
He's made plenty of his own racist, incendiary comments, whether it's with regard to Gaza or with regard to Arabs more broadly. If that's the moderate in Israel, it's just very hard to imagine without applying the kind of pressure like we applied and the globe applied to South Africa and without using international sanctions and compelling different behavior. If you're relying on the democratic vote of Israeli Jews, 82% of whom support the expulsion of residents of the Gaza Strip entirely, we're nowhere close to the universe that you would like to see.
I, don't necessarily agree. It is in Israel's long-term interest, and this is the case that Jasser will continue to make, that Israel can only have a future worth it for the Jewish people if it compromises and allows there to be a Palestinian state. What it gets out of that is normalization of its relations with Saudi Arabia and the whole Gulf. It needs political leadership, and I will fight for it. I believe it's possible. I know there are examples in history of this happening. That's why we do the work that we do.
But
You've been attempting your so-called two-state solution since when? 1967? 1987 after the First Intifada? There was the Six-Day War. There was the assassinations. And whenever you got just close enough, as Arafat did, to getting that two-state solution, magically, it just doesn't happen. And the same thing will happen if Benjamin gets his way. They'll work on it. They'll get close. But think of it in a lot of ways, ladies and gentlemen, as the Mansion Cinema Fetterman effect. You'll get oh so close. So very, very close. And then it just won't happen. You'll be off by 1 vote. You'll be off by 2 votes. This is unacceptable because, again, this softens the blow. Softening the blow is so much more dangerous. So much more dangerous. That is why liberal Zionism, which doesn't really exist, but we are under the pretext that it does exist because in their mind it does. And this is what they're trying to sell. And that's why we have to speak up about this in a very profound way.
at this point, when the reality of what Israel is doing on the ground is so different from what the liberal kind of vision for it is propping up that liberal vision of it, fueling a delusional level of support for the reality on the ground.
Only if one is not calling out that delusion. I do not spare any words in terms of describing just how awful these people are and what they're doing, how it violates every shred of my Jewish moral identity, everything that I've taught my kids about what it means to be a good person and follow the ethics and the morals of our people. I write about this every week. No one's giving up on the vision of what an America can and should be. I won't give up on the idea a state that is the national homeland of the Jewish people can also treat the other people who live there well and can live at peace with its neighbors, including a state for the Palestinian people. And the horrors of this last few years is actually a moment for Israelis to take a look and say, well, maybe it actually is time to try a non-Netanyahu path. I believe that this is a really important argument to make to people both in this country and that country.
So as you can see, the same argument is being made by anybody that is a part of these BS talking points. That's what this is. And he's still talking about a two-state solution. This is the bane of our existence when it comes to this so-called liberal Zionist movement, because they're still trying to convince people that a two-state solution is possible. How is that possible when in a matter of weeks, Netanyahu and his people will control 70% of Gaza's land. And in a very short while, they'll control all of it. And you know how many more people will be dead? Potentially tens, if not hundreds of thousands more. Now we just don't know. You know, the one thing that we really underestimate, because we don't have cameras on the ground, we don't know what's going on in any of these places. How do we know who's actually alive and who isn't? How do we have an accurate account for what's really going on versus what is or isn't going on? We don't know. We're taking a lot of things on faith. As you know, our channel has been very fortunate to be able to interview actual Palestinians in Gaza on the ground under the cover of night, a couple of them in very dangerous, precarious situations by going forward and doing it and letting us know that whatever bullshit we're being sold by corporate media and even a lot of these so-called independent media outlets is not telling the truth about what's going on. Therein lies the reality. The assumption that, well, yeah, we'll just get rid of Netanyahu and Smotrich and Gvir and, you know, and away we go. This is the problem. But it's a much bigger problem, ladies and gentlemen. Because as we now know, the merger of the corporate and military state is happening in real time. Now, we thought for a minute that the president of the United States was going to back off, that maybe, just maybe, a deal was going to be made. And as we know, you get so close, and yet you're so very, very far away. And then you wonder, why does the president do things like this? Of all the things that he could be doing right now, within a matter of hours after reinstituting the bombing efforts against the Iranian people, he does this at the White House yesterday.
This was a special token of affection given by myself and the First Lady to Prime Minister and the First Lady of Israel. And it's a key. We call it a key to the White House. Well, listen, the reality is that, Netanyahu, he comes to the White House quite often, very often, even in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping with one of my mistresses. And you know what ends up happening? It's a really inconvenient thing. I just told him, listen, I'm going to make you a spare key. You can have your own bedroom. Just don't bother me in the middle of the night. If you could do that for me, it would be really great. And so I got him his key, and he really appreciates it. It's a beautiful key made out of real gold. Fantastic, really great. And so now maybe these problems will go away, right? I mean, I've done everything I can for him. I don't know what more I can do. And so he gives him a key to the White House, the key to Washington, D.C. Well, at least they've made it official. At least they've made it official. And it's a key to our country and to our hearts.
A key to our country and our hearts. Think about it. What in the ever-loving hell is this? In fact, who's the actual president? Who is the person that's actually controlling this? This is an incredibly horrific look. A sinister look, no less. And that level of propaganda runs very deep. So as bad as this is, you would ask yourself, what would possess the president to sit down and continue to cuck himself to this bastard? Well, they both are, but in this case, we all know who's getting pegged, and it sure as hell ain't Netanyahu. Well, you have one stooge, and now you have the other. In the case of Itamar Ben Gvir, when questioned about making a deal with Iran.
השר בן גביר, האם אתה חושב שהסכם רע לישראל, כמו שטראמפ עלול להביא לאיראן, יפגע בגוש הימין בבחירות הקרובות?
קודם כל יש דבר, מה שנקרא, שהוא הדבר האמיתי, זה חיי אדם. הסכם רע למדינת ישראל יכול לפגוע בחיי אדם. אני יודע שראש הממשלה נתניהו וכולנו, כחברי קבינט, גם קבינט מצומצם, גם קבינט רחב, גם כממשלת ישראל, לא ניתן לדבר הזה לקרות.
אבל זה הסכם
רע, זה הסכם שיכול לפגוע במדינת ישראל, ואנחנו לא ניתן לדבר הזה לקרות. הסכם רע לא יהיה, לא יכול לפגוע בחיי האדם. אני יודע שראש הממשלה נתניהו וכולנו, כחברי קבינט, גם קבינט מצומצם, גם קבינט רחב, גם כממשלת ישראל, לא ניתן לדבר הזה לקרות.
אבל זה הסכם
רע.
So you can see it right here. When asked why or can we have any type of a deal with Iran, and this isn't even a question of a deal with Iran and Israel. This is a question of a deal between Iran and the United States. And Gvir is saying, and I quote, Israel will not allow that to happen. Is that so? Well, what exactly are you going to do to prevent the U.S. and Iran from having any type of an agreement? Could there be a Samson option on the table? Could there be a threat of actual attacks against our own people, of which I am already convinced beyond any doubt that has been done repeatedly? We have no idea how many of our American soldiers that are fighting on behalf of Israel are already dead, which I'm sure there are plenty. And we are never going to know anything about this until way, way, way into the future, probably when most of these guys are dead, as is often the case, like with JFK's assassination. You don't find out anything until they're long gone, above reproach, above the law. somebody like Gvir, who right now should be charged with crimes against humanity after what he was caught doing on camera, and yet he's doing press conferences, being given a platform to share his thoughts about what should and shouldn't be happening. It's amazing, isn't it? But why would anybody obey the rule of law when we have become a lawless country, a lawless society, and a lawless world, when we allow people like this to have any form of power? And much power he does have.
זה הסכם שיכול לפגוע במדינת ישראל, ואנחנו לא ניתן לה את הדבר הזה לקרות. לא יקרה. הסכם רע לא יהיה, לא יכול להיות, משום שבסופו של דבר, ההסכם רע, זה לא קשור לבחירות או לא בחירות.
Dangerous. Very dangerous. So now you have the President of the United States giving him cake, giving him cake. Well, he probably gave him cake too, but he's giving him keys to the city, giving him keys to the White House. What more would you like to give him? Why don't you give him Fort Knox while you're at it? Please share your thoughts on Ben Gvir.
I want you to get this fuck where he breathes. I want you to find this Nancy boy Elliot Ness. I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burnt to the ground. I want to go to the middle of the night. I want to piss on his ass.
I mean, yes, that is what should happen. But this, of course, is something that was attempted to be done already once, and it didn't happen. Maybe there might be another attempt. You never know. And guys, I can't emphasize this enough. We're at almost 450 live viewers. If you haven't smashed that like button yet, we would really appreciate it if you would. We want to try to get this out there to as many people as we can. As you know, we are fighting that algorithmic battle every time we go live. So if you haven't done it yet, we really would appreciate it. Just smash that like button. Let's get this out there to as many people as possible. And I would also tell you that the real danger in so many ways is this sort of AI revolution that is of the worst kind. And we have warned, as we already have this evening, how detrimental it's going to be, as it is already, economically, environmentally, and now militarily, as we are seeing. But we probably could have surmised that that was the intention from the very beginning. And that it was done in the conjunction with the state of Israel should not surprise anybody either. I want to show you what happens when you do not stand up to this genocidal state. This may not seem like anything significant on the surface, but let me assure you, this is a big problem, a very big problem. I'm not even going to lay the foundation. I am just going to let you all listen to this very carefully. This is the danger of AI, the data centers, and this unholy alliance with the state of Israel.
AI-generated film just got into Tribeca, made for $2,000 with no actors, sets, or cameras. Dreams of Violence is a 75-minute docudrama set in Tehran following 5 strangers caught in the government crackdown during the January protests. Produced by an AI startup called Fountain Zero. Every image was generated using AI video tools built from journalistic reports, photographs, and eyewitness accounts, with the entire film completed in just 3 months. A full-length feature that completely replaced all physical filmmaking entirely with AI models. Director Ash Kusha, who left Tehran in 2009, made the film with his brother, and he has been candid about the ethical weight of using AI to dramatize the deaths of real people.
Now, if this is not propaganda in real time, then I don't know what is. What this is also proving, as has been the case, we have found, or we have discovered through very good intel, that so much of what we saw on the ground was related to particularly US and Israel saboteurs within the protest movement. But you know what they don't talk about in this type of propaganda? Whether or not the Iranian people want to be bombed into smithereens. Now, sure, it's certainly an argument worth making that Khomeini's government was not one that people of Iran wanted to be under. But at the same time, as has been pointed out many times, they don't want to be under Western control either. And this is the problem with having trillions of natural resources. We want to control them, and we will do everything in our capacity in order to make that happen. And so these propaganda films are now going to be coming out, and there's no proof that they're even real. This is all AI generated. And whose word are we taking? somebody who fled Iran 17 years ago, and yet that person definitely knows what's going on, right? And now this film has been accepted into the Tribeca Film Festival. This is an AI film. These are not actors. These are fake. These are AI-generated people. This is all fake. And yet this is a film in the Tribeca Film Festival. Why? Because it is a pro-Israel, anti-Iranian piece of propaganda. They're not telling the whole story. And why would they? This is, again, one of the scary elements of what happens when we do not stand up to this. You think this is going to end? This is going to get so much worse.
And the Tribeca Film Festival fully accepted the entry. Co-founder Jane Rosenthal said that what moved the selection committee was not the
Yes, we all know about Jane Rosenthal, and yes, she is, well, you know the rest.
The technological achievement, but the emotional immediacy and urgency of the story itself. But a $2,000 film with no crew just cleared one of the most competitive feature selections in American independent cinema. The assumption has always been that festival-level filmmaking requires serious resources. And what comes next is a massive question the entire industry is now going to have to answer.
As always, would love to hear your thoughts.
I'll tell you my thoughts, Mr. Patrick. The idea that you would cover this in anything other than a hypercritical fashion leads one to believe that perhaps you're on board with this nonsense, genocide, insane activity. How can I prove I'm not AI? I don't know. I can't prove it. I mean, that's Jen's way of trying to prove that I'm not AI, I guess. I don't know. I think I'm pretty tame tonight, but once again, this is very true. It is disturbing. We have an insane amount of propaganda that happens on a regular basis. And as much as we think that we can't be fooled by this, just remember, good friend of the show, Zach Faust, was on the ground with Ryan Mata, with James Lee, with Tiffany Cianci, interviewing any of the voters that were willing to share their thoughts at the exit polls, whether or not they voted for Thomas Massie or they voted for Ed Galreen. And what a lot of them said was that one of the reasons they voted for Galreen is because they believed that Thomas Massie was not only a Democratic plant, but that he was having an affair with AOC and Ilhan Omar. Now, anyone who saw this clip could clearly see that it was AI generated, that it was fake. And yet, somehow, perhaps because they are of a considerably older age, they believed that it was real, that this actually happened. And so as long as there are people that will be fooled into believing that this is real, this will continue to become a problem. And what it also shows, and Jen is right, how could this be legal? If people are convinced that what they saw was real, even though you'd have to be a moron not to see that it's fake. But apparently some of them were fooled. To me, there's some serious legal action that I think should be on the table there. Because what the hell else can you trust? And that to me is a very big part of the propaganda network. And so I think a lot of you guys probably did see what I thought was a very impressive piece of material when it came to Glenn Greenwald. Yeah, I would agree, because people admitted that that actually affected their decision and that video was fake. And so as a result, I do think that at the bare minimum, Massie has a lawsuit that he could probably push. Now, why is this such a big problem? It's a big problem because while I am not a fan of Jubilee in any way, I think their style is dumb. However, got to give credit where credit's due to Glenn Greenwald, who did an excellent job and is an anti-Zionist Jew, in case anybody forgot. So he sat down with a whole bunch of still MAGA supporters. And it's very interesting listening to people when they have to defend their position, not just on Israel, but on endless war.
I want to talk about that. I just want to ask you, and I'm not trying to be personal in any way, but I do think it's an interesting phenomenon that for centuries, when countries wanted to go to war and people said, yeah, let's go to war, the big test was, are you willing to risk your own life in the war that you think is so important to defend your country's interests? You seem like a young guy to me. Have you ever thought about going and fighting in this war that you're cheering on?
I mean, I've thought about joining the military before. I don't know about this war specifically, but.
Yeah, you see, because unfortunately, this war specifically would likely get him killed. And he doesn't want to get killed because he's a coward and probably a cuck too. And of course, as a result, he wants other people, much like every Israeli, to have somebody else go and die on his behalf because he is not willing to die for this country. That is a huge part of this problem. And that has always been a huge part of warfare. The loudest in the room that cheer on war are always the biggest cowards. Always. And they sure as hell have never served, and they sure as hell have never served in combat. Because if they did, they would understand that war is hell, and it should always be the last resort. If we were in a Red Dawn situation here in the United States, where a foreign adversary stormed our beaches, entered our land, started killing Americans left and right, would I stand up to defend my nation? Yes, I would. And I would believe most Americans would probably do the same. But as you know, we go around the world picking fights with everybody that is in our way of economic and political dominance. And that again gets back to the biggest reason why we tolerate anything and everything when it comes to the state of Israel. What's the biggest issue here? The economic and political ramifications of dealing with them is still deeply embedded within our governmental structure. And now they're attempting to make it even more insane with this merging of the two militaries. We've got more to go.
But that's what makes them heroes. They put themselves in dangerous situations.
Yeah, I'm asking that because, as I said earlier, we are a country that constantly fights wars. It's extremely aberrational for other countries on the planet, including very powerful ones like China, as I said before, that has grown so significantly because they know that war is not a way that you pretend you protect your national interests, but you undermine them. But we are so eager, so it's so easy for us to say, oh yeah, go fight that war, go blow up these people.
We're a global superpower. Of course, we're dealing with stuff all the time.
China is a global superpower as well and doing infinitely better than the United States by so many metrics because of the. Go ask Latin American and African countries with whom they're dealing more and who they prefer to deal with, China or the United States, and they will tell you that the United States is a bully country that runs the world through military force and China isn't.
You know, we pointed out that one of the key takeaways from the Vegas bioweapons lab story with the Israeli national who was granted immunity. They threw out the case. Now, of course, the judge who threw out the case is an Israeli national as well. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't do the same for the Chinese national that was involved. He got prosecuted. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there are, different rules for different people. But not everybody either recognizes this or understands it. This is why China is ahead of us. Now, perhaps their GDP is not exactly ours just yet. But if you are measuring 10, 20, 30 years, which is a generation, into the future, what trajectory do you think we're going on versus what they're going on? If China is here and we're here, that's where it's going. And anyone with a reasonable disposition can see the same thing. That's not to say that China doesn't do bad things, but China is much better at the political, economic, global game than our country is. And China does not drop bombs left and right all over this planet for the purpose of maintaining their empire. And so Glenn is right. And for most of these people, they don't seem to be too aware of that.
That's one of the problems that we have. But Iran has not attacked the United States, has no ability to attack the United States. A moral country only goes to war and blows up elementary schools if that country is actually attacking the United States. It's supposed to be a war of last resort. That is not the case here. We're blowing up their country. We're killing their people. We're threatening civilizational annihilation.
Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys saw the blonde, typical Trumpy-looking woman, shaking her head, getting upset. And so she took a turn at the table. Listen closely.
Hello.
Hello there. There's so many things I could talk for hours on end. Even giving Kamala Harris an appointation of, I don't know if that's a word, but appointing her as the...
If you don't know if it's a word or not, you probably shouldn't use it.
Next candidate because he wasn't able to run. You're America first, right? That's what you're saying, right? Okay, so do you agree that it was corrupt?
So I'm somebody who believes that there was a lot of corruption in the Biden administration. My claim is not that the Biden administration was free of meaningful corruption. It had a lot of corruption. My claim is that the Trump administration has a lot more corruption. And we can talk about what those financial deals are.
Please.
Okay, well, I'll just give you one example.
Okay.
Jared Kushner, who's now running Middle East foreign policy and negotiating Middle East policy for Donald Trump, his son-in-law.
And doing a great job.
Right before he...
Could you imagine? Listen again.
Who's now running Middle East foreign policy and negotiating Middle East policy for Donald Trump, his son-in-law.
And doing a great job.
Doing a great job. What exactly would you base Jared Kushner's foreign policy ability or efficiency? What are you basing that on? Because of something you heard from Fox News or from Benny Johnson or Gunther Eagleman or Cat Turd or Libs of TikTok? Who was it? She's probably drinking the bleach is the problem. This is a prime example of just not fully understanding anything about the world and just taking everything at face value because your side says that this is good. Jared Kushner is as dangerous as anybody in the entire world. Stephen Miller, a lot of these guys have power. Jared Kushner, in many ways, has ultimate power. And this woman says that he's doing a great job. Does she realize that the reason why Long Branch, New Jersey has the American flag only flying on one pole and the other 6 are Israeli flags? Does she know that? His family owns that apartment complex right on the Atlantic Ocean. And that's something that will be duplicated many times over if given the opportunity. We are going to talk about Peter Thiel on Monday. Jen and I will talk about that together, why he's relocating to Argentina. Because again, when you put in a puppet like Milei, this is where a lot of them are going to flee. And listen, I feel terrible for the Argentinians, but we don't want them fleeing to our country.
Or right before he was put into that position, just a year or so earlier, he created a hedge fund, and the number one investor were the Saudis, who invested $2 billion in Jared Kushner's fund, both as a reward for a job well done, for the service that the Trump administration in the first term gave to the Saudis, and also for making sure that the Saudis' interests are protected. It's basically a bribe directly to the Trump family.
So I want to do a little sidebar real quick. Kushner's hedge fund, Affinity Partners, saw a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund shortly after Kushner left the White House. Kushner worked closely with Saudi Arabia during his time at the White House, but denies any conflict of interest. Yeah, because why would anybody admit that they have a conflict of interest when they're making billions of dollars in corruption? This is a prime example of why people do not trust this country to function as a society anymore. And why would you? The criminal enterprise is not only moving at such a speed that you can't catch it, it's like cheetah speed. No pun intended. And at the same time, where is the rule of law? Where is the accountability? That's the point. And maybe the whole purpose of having people like this who want to be on this show, these are the same people that are going to be walking the National Mall for 2 weeks leading up to the 4th of July in support of the President of the United States because they can't think for themselves. They're told what they're told and they believe it. And even when you're confronted with tactical, factual evidence, they won't look the other way. And this is Glenn Greenwald we're talking about. We're not talking about somebody who's saying just go and support the Democratic Party. This is somebody who's saying, wake the fuck up already. What are you looking at? But some people can't be helped. They cannot be saved. They don't know anything, and yet they're so sure they know everything.
The Trump family created a crypto company called World Liberty Financial, 49% of which is now owned by the United Arab Emirates. We've heard so much here about how important the UAE is, about how Saudi Arabia is, and they're funneling gigantic sums of money directly to the Trump family.
Okay, but look.
A United Arab Emirates royal purchased a 49% interest in World Liberty Financial, another random company, LLC, that pops up out of nowhere, a Trump family-owned venture for $500 million, days before Trump's second inauguration. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you quite a bit. It's also been well documented for quite some time, as many of you have probably seen and now know, that the unholy alliance between the United States and Israel, if it includes a third party, it is the United Arab Emirates. Pretty much most savvy politicos know at this point that that is correct.
And they're funneling gigantic sums of money directly to the Trump family.
Okay, but look at, I just want to interject a little bit, because look at Nancy Pelosi, look at all the inside trading.
I agree with you completely.
It goes way beyond that.
No, that's
so
not
both
way beyond
sides
that.
do it. Is it right? No, but Biden administration and all of the people on the Democratic side are doing it so much worse on such a...
You see, you want to say that more people do it in the Biden orbit? Fine, I'll even give you that one. The idea that you have any clue as to what you're talking about, lady, Michelle, if that's your real name, probably isn't. If you see this, I know one of Don Jr.'s primary business partners. I've met him. And I can assure you that whatever you think you know about real financial corruption, you don't know anything. You know less than nothing. And at the same time, I am not here to provide any protection for the likes of Pelosi, for the likes of Wasserman Schultz, for Senator Mullen, any of these heavy hitters that do insider trading. I am not here to protect them, defend them, no matter what. But at the same time, do you really think any of these small potatoes really have any idea what it means to get to the very top of the mountain? The President of the United States is open for business, and he does it without a shred of humility. He doesn't care who knows. He doesn't care who sees it. And it is always to the top bidder. And when you are in control of the world's hegemony regarding its currency, current resources, and much more, you are now seeing the legitimate effects of what happens when there are no guardrails, where there is no protection. Libertarian utopia. What are you going to do? You want to know why you're going to be spending $10 on a gallon of gas in a very short time? This is why. And perhaps you're too stupid to see it or too naive. Whatever it is important to understand why this is a problem. And hopefully, if you hear it enough times, maybe you'll eventually understand.
Larger scale. It's affecting America.
I worked a lot on the Hunter Biden corruption case, principally that he got $50,000 a month from a company in Ukraine called Burisma when Vice President Biden had immense influence in Ukraine.
It was way more than that.
And as Andy McCarthy said.
All right, I want you to listen one more time because it has been well documented that Hunter Biden was probably receiving about $50,000-$60,000 a month from Burisma when he was working there.
Corruption case, principally that he got $50,000 a month from a company in Ukraine called Burisma when Vice President Biden had immense influence in Ukraine.
It was way more than that.
How do you know that? How do you, Michelle, know that it was way more than 50,000? How do you know that? How does anybody know anything? You know, I have often said that I know a lot about politics and I know very little in the grand scheme of things. Because I am still a civilian. I am still on the outside looking in. And I only know so much, and to take most with a grain of salt. I do not sit in those rooms. I do not know how these deals go down. I don't know how these shell companies move money to whom and to where. But yet somehow this lady knows. She knows better than anybody else. And when they're and she said it so emphatically, like she was so sure of herself when she said it. Much more than that. Much more. There's a great saying about the ignorance of humanity, the ignorance of man or woman. There are no sides anymore. That's over with. Like if you're still playing that game, you're an enemy of the United States. Not the same as somebody who's supporting the state of Israel, but let me assure you, if you're still playing that red-blue bullshit, you're an enemy of the United States.
McCarthy said, who's a longtime Republican conservative prosecutor, in order to talk about or compare the corruption, similar corruption by the Trump sons and by Jared Kushner, you have to add 2 zeros to the amounts. And I think that's what the concern is.
Biden was so corrupt.
We gotta move on. Thank you. You've been voted out.
Biden this, Biden that. How about Biden, yes, and Trump as well? And the last one I'm going to show you, and this is very important, guys. I want you to understand that it isn't just about Israel. It's also about, as I've been pointing out time and again, the last line of defense that Israel has over the United States and its people. Not all of them, obviously. That's changed dramatically. But for those that are still willing to look the other way, anti-Muslim bigotry is very real, and disregarding the Palestinian people, the Iranian people, that their humanity, their lives don't matter, that they should just be blown to smithereens. Here's one more MAGA supporter and how they view this problem.
It is completely different when their own people are supporting it. My main point is this.
How do you know? Let me ask that, because it's so fascinating to me when people say the Iranian people want to be bombed, they want to have their bridges blown up, they want to have their
I'm just saying,
how do you know what the Iranian people want? There are 96 million of them. Have you been there? Do you speak the language?
No, I've just seen the videos of in Tehran where there are.
And where do you think those videos are coming from? Do you really think that they are allowing to think of it this way, Mr. I am so hot and bothered about ever? Have you been? Here's what I can tell you, Mr. Wave. That's what I'm going to call him. Here's what I can tell you, Mr. Wave. When you have control over satellite data like Starlink does through Musk, through any of the channels that is getting out from Tehran, what do you think is getting out? Anything and everything that is pro-U.S. Israel Western propaganda. Nothing, and I do mean nothing, that is in favor of Iranian liberation through their own means. Not with us, and not anything to do with us. And the only way that information ever gets out is second and third hand directly from people that are there, usually through their own family members, one of which I have a direct contact with. But you talk about this like you know what the fuck you're talking about, and you don't know anything. And that's why Glenn is clearly upset here, because he's basically telling him in his very eloquent, professional, decorum way, you are a dumbass who doesn't understand anything about politics, much less foreign policy, much less politics. And that is a huge part of this problem.
Are thousands of them cheering in the streets.
There are thousands of Israelis today in Tel Aviv protesting against the war with Iran.
90% of Israelis support the war, and they have taken no.
You're right.
They have taken on 3,700 casualties in the civilian population, and they support it.
This is my point, though, is that you cannot judge what an entire population wants by the fact that
I can see it in the streets. I don't have to judge it. I'm looking at them cheer in the streets.
You can see in the streets in the United States huge numbers of people marching against Donald Trump and calling him a monarch and a Hitler. But you wouldn't say that that means that that's representative of American public opinion. How do you, who never visited Iran, who doesn't speak the language, who I bet knows very little about Iranian history, how do you know what the majority of 96 million Iranians want when it comes to whether we want them, they want us bombing their country?
I know there are, we don't have data in the last few weeks, but I know there are journalists that have gone there. They have created public opinion polls asking who supports the IRGC and who does not. It always overwhelmingly comes out that they do not support
You're the one who told me that you weren't that bothered by the blowing up of that school because we should prioritize American lives over Iranian lives, weren't you?
We were talking about the timing of it.
Now you're like, we should go to war because the people
We're talking
want
about
this?
the timing of why Trump did this. And I think the reason why he's done this is because the Iranian people will make it easier. The same is true for Israel, by the way. Israel's taken way more casualties than the U.S. And the reason why this is America first is because Donald Trump is able to see that Israel and the Iranian people are willing to do the work so that we take on less casualties.
Did he really just say that? One more time.
Casualties than the U.S. And the reason why this is America first is because Donald Trump is able to see that Israel and the Iranian people are willing to do the work so that we take on less casualties.
It has already been well documented that the Israelis do everything in their capacity not to end up in combat zones, and that's why secretly over 12,000 U.S. troops that we know of are currently over there fighting on Israel's behalf. That is a fact. And you want to pretend like Israel wants to do the dirty work? I know it's cliche, but, you know, the Jews just pay people off if they want something done. Forgive me for my stereotype. But the idea that you think that Israel wants to do the dirty work and they're going to prevent the U.S. from doing it for them? I mean, I want to know what the hell this guy's on and what that means. Debating Glenn is not a smart move.
Have you seen pro-government? Have you seen pro-government protests in Iran?
No, I have not.
You haven't? You should go check because they're gigantic.
No.
And yes, the reason for that is because every population unites behind their leaders when they're attacked by a foreign country.
I just want to make
a tribal instinct that happens. George Bush was a hated president.
Right.
He got elected. 9/11 happened. All Democrats, liberals, people on the left, for the most part, united behind George Bush. It's a tribal instinct that when you're attacked by a foreign power, you unite behind
I just
your
want
government.
to make one more.
This is also one of the key reasons why, despite what you may or may think about communism, and I do not support communism, this is one of the primary reasons why Castro was able to stay in power for as long as he did at the doorstep of the United States, because the people rallied around their leader that there was attempts on his life every other week by our country. If they had just let sleeping dogs lie, perhaps the Cuban people would have risen up against Castro on their own and they would have dismantled communism. It's possible. But we just can't leave them alone because we wrecked the financial lives of the rich and powerful who had Cuba, specifically Havana, as a little club paradise for the rich and powerful to gamble and get away and fuck over the rest of the world. And the Cuban people decided they didn't want that anymore. And a revolution happened. And ever since 1959, we have been doing the exact same thing. So when these numbnuts talk about what they think they know or they don't know about Iran and their revolution that happened 20 years later, it's sort of the same thing. We just cannot get out of our own way. And that in many ways is why these things happen. And kudos in a big way to Glenn Greenwald for doing a phenomenal job, as you can see. And as I only showed about 7 or 8 minutes of this exchange, he sat down with these guys for, I believe, about 2 hours. That was on film. We don't even know how much additional footage there probably was that was ended up on the cutting room floor. But this gives you a pretty good idea of when you are stuck in that mindset. Completely stuck. You can't shake it. And they don't want to shake it. Because the one thing I've seen, and this is true from any events that I've been to, whether by myself, with Jen, with other people, the get-togethers for the MAGA movement, especially over the past decade, it's very community-oriented. It's very flag-waving, very red, white, and blue, very pro-America. And it is a unifying way of life for many people. And I get that. And even if the premise behind it and why it's happening is false or wrong, you can't convince people that make up their entire identity based on an ideology that they're wrong. It's like trying to convince people that falling on the sword for religion is a complete waste of your life. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't believe in God and that you shouldn't be God-fearing. But the whole idea that you never question your church, your synagogue, your mosque, etc., that is detrimental to the health and safety of humanity. Killing in the name of faith is tale as old as time. And the same is true when your religion, in so many ways, is based on your politic. Because for them, it is a religion. And that's how this works. And so for Glenn to do this, and he did it well, but you could tell by the time he got to Mr. Wave at the end, he'd had enough. He's like, I'm presenting you with tangible evidence about what the real problem is here, and you just don't want to see it. And the refusal to see it, I have said in many ways, is one of the great detrimental components of our time, because it is being laid at the feet of what I've often said is the last bastion of hope that the Zionist movement has in the United States, and that is anti-Muslim bigotry. And that is very real, and it's still happening. And you can see by the way that these MAGA supporters were talking that they completely devalue humanity when it comes to those that are Muslim. It's just the way it is. And that, of course, leads to what I thought was a critical conversation that most of you have probably already heard about between Candace Owens and Ana Kasparian. And it's interesting, when you're in politics long enough, you see these sort of evolutions that happen in terms of where people will go as far as their political dispositions go. Ana has evolved, Candace has evolved, and it seems that this sort of coming together on a very critical issue like Israel presents many opportunities for this, you want to call it the America First movement, I'm fine with that. Whatever it grows into, it's a pathway to the future that doesn't involve being conscripted to the two-party duopoly and to our current circumstances. We have to be open-minded about how we are able to break bread. And unlike what Norm Finkelstein said recently about Tucker Carlson, you don't have to trust anybody, but you have to be willing to break bread with those that are willing to fight on the same lines. Always at arm's length, and keep your distance. But make no mistake, these particular issues are very critical, as was discussed here between these two ladies.
I started to change my mind about you. It was a few years ago where, well, first of all, it started with your firing at the Daily Wire and what you were fired for, right? The fact that you were willing to call out a genocide for what it is. And I really respected that, because there weren't really any media people on the right at all at that time who were willing to do.
And do not forget who Candace Owens was working for at the time that she decided to speak up against the state of Israel. It was little Ben Shapiro.
Do it. Then after that, you went on, I think maybe a few podcasts where you talked about your evolution in regard to your perception of Muslims. And I was like, okay, that takes an honest person to say that, to like admit I was wrong, and especially on the right, where, the Islamophobia, which I think is the product of brainwashing, is still very much prominent, right?
It takes a lot of humility, I think, when you have a public platform. People are always rooting for you to be wrong anyway. And I think it's the reason that so many people hold on to ideas even when they know they're wrong.
Yes.
They just don't want to do the thing and go through the process of change.
But people love it.
Yeah.
People love when you're willing to be honest about what you were incorrect about, and that you're willing to recalibrate or evolve on an issue.
Why is genocide sometimes okay? And going, I can't have gotten that wrong. Come on, Republicans. This is obviously what's happening in Gaza is wrong. It's kind of a scary process, because then you go, how could I have had this so wrong?
It's a scary.
There's a reason why, Candace. There's a reason why, Anna, and I believe you both know. And yes, little Ben Shapiro is stewing in his own crapulence as we speak. But what you have to remember, and this is important, it's all about our economic and political system. Those that speak out against the genocidal state are basically in the eye of the hurricane of the current construct of our economic and political system. So when we say there's a reason why people are willing to overlook the crimes against humanity that the genocidal state, in conjunction with our own government and military, are committing on this world, and particularly the Palestinian people, because of that economic dependency. Hence why they understand public opinion has dramatically shifted against the state of Israel. So what do they do now? Now they're trying to merge the two militaries together and create a military-based jobs program, starting in states like Arkansas and Mississippi that are so economically dependent on anything that the government is going to be willing to do to incentivize, because no one wants to go to Arkansas or Mississippi. They have no solvency, nothing, unless somebody decides to create one. And this is one of those methods that basically keeps people silent about the realities of what is going on from a domestic and foreign policy perspective that maybe isn't in their backyard. But for those that are there, that will, in this case, control the federally elected officials at the state, local, and, well, as I said, federal, state, and local level. That's the whole point. That's the game. That's how it works. That's what playing God looks like. We want those data centers there so we can create those jobs, right? Among other reasons. But that is the key component here as to why Candace is looking around saying, how could we get genocide so wrong? It isn't so much about whether you get it wrong or not. It's about whether or not economically you're dependent on making sure that you get it wrong.
Process, because politics has become more than just, oh, this is a group of people I agree with on policies. It turned into, I think, a replacement for religion for some people. It turned into, because think about, the era when everyone went to church or everyone went to temple or mosque, whatever. It's your community. But then as people became less and less religious in this country, I think politics or political parties kind of became the church.
How quickly I was sort of excommunicated. And they tried to, just as if you're leaving a cult, convince me that I was the crazy person,
right,
for saying something so sensible. Like,
that is the history of anything. This is anybody who walks into a church and suggests that maybe the Old Testament is kind of crazy, or that maybe we need more proof. It's not, oh, that's a great point. Maybe we should think about that. It's, that person is a heretic. Stay as far away from them as you can, for they are a tool of the devil, not an apostle of Jesus. I'm just using that as an example. There are many other examples, but that's a good one. Groupthink is a very dangerous animal, and it happens in all corners of life. Individuals are resourceful, but groups are dangerous. Religion, politics, and this is often why I think Jefferson in particular emphasized the importance of the separation of church and state. You cannot merge these two together, and yet today it's as merged as it's ever been, which I think is also a reflection of how this is falling apart. Can't sustain this system anymore.
Hey, killing kids is wrong. We shouldn't do that. Like saying a statement like Brian Mast did about the Palestinians, there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian, which is what I was tweeting about in particular. Everyone should just have been like, of course, this is a wrong statement from Brian Mast. But they tried to play this psychological game on me.
Talking about how it's okay to just slaughter an entire group of people, including women, children, elderly people. The fact that you were willing to put everything on the line to speak out against the genocide in Gaza made me realize that you are actually good faith on other political views you have.
How did I get brainwashed? I thought the same thing. I was watching the Holocaust movies. All of that is a part of your growing up, your brainwashing experience, what you're learning in the classroom, who is the victim, and who do you have to defend, who is being oppressed. And so there's this sort of trigger mechanism that is within all of us. It's buried within us from the time that we're kids, and we don't realize it because we're just taking in so much media. We're listening to our teachers, and then we're like, October 7th happens, and then they go, remember all that stuff? Like, this is now, you have to understand what they're going to do next. Think about what happened. You don't want another Holocaust.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think they were just kind of part of this algorithmic bubble where they're only exposed to one thing. And when it came to the Muslim population, I think that the dehumanization was seen in the media across the board. And that brainwashing worked for a really long time. I mean, it definitely convinced Americans to support wars that we shouldn't have supported.
Going back to those presets when we're in our youth, 9/11.
Yep.
It was so raw. It was so scary. The way they made us stand up at 9/11 every day, the time in school. Moment of silence for what the Muslims did to us.
I was guilty of it. I didn't condemn Muslims, but I always said, the terrorists, if they ever came over here, that I would fight. And I came pretty close. And Lord knows what would have happened. I waved that American flag. I remember going to Yankee Stadium and during the 7th inning stretch, the moment of silence, and this went on for years, defending our freedom and our way of life at every game. I mean, the propaganda was real. The F-35 flyovers. But this is how you keep people in line. And this is how you get people to defend what's evil and wrong versus what's right and righteous. And having that epiphany that Candace clearly has had, I'd like to believe Tucker has had as well. Perhaps Marjorie Taylor Greene did. Certainly Thomas Massie. There are good people out there that I don't ideologically line up with in a substantial way politically, but I have my agreements on core issues that matter. And that, especially as our republic seems to be hanging by a thread, I think is very important. Probably more important than anything else right now.
About that's kind of, so I was just like, Muslims, like this is just how they live, this is what they do, and didn't register to me as Islamophobia. I just thought I'm educated. It's a token of your education to understand how despicable Muslims are.
I remember that. I remember that so well. I remember the unfair attacks against Muslims. By the way, I mean, there are different Muslim beliefs like sects and whatever, but everything was just lumped together. Muslims bad, and this is going to be used as a justification for us to enrich defense contractors. They profit off war.
That is the biggest reason, and it's always been the biggest reason. War is good. Excuse me. War is the best for business. It always has been. It's not a grand conspiracy. And the contracts fly and creating a false sense or lack thereof of security. Remember what Franklin said. Those that would give up liberty for security deserve neither. And as Jen has pointed out time and time again, we have been ready, willing, and able since 9/11 to give up our freedoms for a little bit more security in our own minds. But in reality, we're much less safe. And just remember, the Patriot Act was on the table during the Clinton administration, and they knew that they couldn't pass it under normal circumstances. But they found a way. And then they passed it. They didn't just create the Patriot Act as a result of 9/11. They created 9/11 as an excuse to pass the Patriot Act. And this is one part of that conversation. Here's the second.
Because after World War I, because of the Armenian genocide, Armenians became, they fled. Many went to Syria. They were forced to do a death march, as my great-grandmother was, and she survived it, but my great-grandfather didn't. This is on my dad's side. They killed him, and so she had to do that death march that she survived with her children in tow, including my grandfather. I didn't know this until very recently. My last name wouldn't have been Kasparian. Kasparian is the last name of the man who took my great-grandmother and grandfather in and married her and whatever. So I would have had a completely different last name. This made me much more curious about like my ancestry and everything. And on my mom's side, they fled to Palestine. Okay, so my grandmother's birth certificate said Haifa, Palestine. And so I started doing some research into that because she was born in 1937 in Haifa. In 1947, a year before the Nakba happened, basically the Soviet Union was sending ships to what is now Israel to take Armenians back to the homeland because, well, there were these terrorist groups that were carrying out terror attacks against the Palestinians and Christians, because Armenians are overwhelmingly Christian, right? And so at that time, what my research showed me was that the Irgun, which is one of the 3 terrorist groups that formed Israel, was attacking the local communities there in Haifa, doing bombings and all sorts of crazy things. So like,
what else would you expect? Remember, they were attempting to get this genocidal state, or should I say this apartheid state. This was a plan that was in place for decades. And they seized upon an opportunity in 1947 to start doing attacks. Might have even been earlier than that. But they used the Holocaust as an excuse to create another one. Don't underestimate the relationship between Hitler and Ben-Gurion. We've done research on that before. We've done clips on that before as well. You can look it up in our archives. And as such, you're hearing it now from somebody who has Palestinian lineage. And you can understand why this is so personal for Anna, because Lord knows how long she was probably keeping that to herself without revealing that she actually has Palestinian lineage. And as a result, it's become very personal for her, as it has been for Candace. It's the same thing. And that's why once you see it, you can't unsee it. There is no going back to sleep on this issue. There is no wrapping Israel's plight in a bow and suggesting that they are just the victims. No, they are an enemy of humanity. They always have been. But now there really is no going back. We'll finish it up.
They fled genocide, went to Haifa, and then had to flee again. But luckily, they were able to go back to their homeland at that time, and they went back to Armenia, and that's where my mom was born.
And it's crazy because those terrorist groups, like, they then came to the United States, their children became executives, politicians. Like, these are what we are dealing with in media are the sons and the daughters of those terrorists. Make no mistake.
And on that note, little Ben Shapiro
You're better than me, Paul. Didn't you say you're hanging there all day? You're higher than me. You're better than me. Yeah, well, I don't miss you. You're not. I'm a father. I can think that you are not better than me at all. Yeah, I'll teach you.
You have to know that when Shapiro heard Candace make that statement, he probably wanted to set off a nuclear bomb. Truer words could not have been spoken. As Jen pointed out, Rahm Emanuel is living proof of that point, that the genocide never ended, and the children of these terrorists are now at the highest levels of our government and in control of God knows how much money, resources, and power. And the more these conversations happen, the more we bring together the likes of Ana Kasparian, Candace Owens, and many more that are America First United against Israel and our government raining holy hell on the rest of the world. This is the only way out. Differences must be set aside. Coalitions must be formed. And efforts must be made. Much greater than this, although this is a great effort. We tip our hat to Ana Kasparian, who we've had disagreements with, and we tip our hat to Candace Owens, who we've also had disagreements with. But when you get right down to brass tacks and you realize where the fault lines actually are, the rest of the stuff is just conversation. This is real, and this is what matters. And I would also say that when you think about the very reason when you think about the very reason why the issue of seeing the likes of Candace Owens and Ana Kasparian come together, and I also want to emphasize, guys, that we've been hovering around the 550 mark pretty much for the past hour. So we've been doing pretty well, but we can't seem to get above it. So if you could like and share this stream, we would be forever grateful. Like to try to get to 600 tonight if we can. As you know, it's been a struggle up that ladder. And as I pointed out, we're testing the waters of seeing if it actually makes more sense for me to go on later than earlier. We'll maybe give it another week or so to test the waters. And if it doesn't continue to produce any type of an upward swing, probably go back to 7, just like we do live streams on Mondays and Thursdays, excuse me. And so, well, one of our OGs is insisting that I start earlier. So I have to take that into consideration. You have to give the audience what they want, especially those who have been with you since the early days. And yes, Jen is in the chat. And forgive me for not recognizing what friends Palestine. Please explain. I would appreciate it. But yes. And so one of the biggest reasons, for your page. Oh, thank you. For you page. Thank you. No, Jen is not using AI. What is everybody thinks we're AI now? See what AI's done? They've completely messed up with people's minds. So with that said, I want people to understand what it means to watch the deliberate lying in the face of massive change that we all know is coming. We know it. You cannot look at what's going on right now and not recognize that there is a seismic shift happening. It just is. It doesn't happen fast enough, but it happens at a pace that right now we're starting to see in real time how they cannot keep this under wraps. And again, they're not going to keep it under wraps because this is what we do. It's our job. And this is also one of the main reasons why I've been supporting Candace Owens. Because Candace, as you know, had a very big role with Turning Point USA. And she has been very adamant about bringing down that organization. Not just necessarily because of the fact that Erica Kirk is so transparently corrupt. It's also the underlings, which we have covered time and again with this organization. And when you think about somebody, for instance, like Thomas Massie, who I do hope is going to, if anybody is going to provide a populist America First run at the presidency in 28, it's him. And as such, one really has to wonder how an organization like Turning Point USA, if you know what its original incarnation was under Charlie Kirk, you would also know that Charlie is a huge supporter, was a huge supporter of Thomas Massie. But lo and behold, we go through this whole process of the assassination, and then little Ben and his organization, among others, write 7-figure checks, and then the entire organization, I covered it earlier this evening, Kenman. When you go under their wing, you don't come out from under it. You do exactly as you're told. And this is exactly what happened. Turning Point USA was questioned as to why they didn't provide any support for Thomas Massie. Yet they provided a lot of support for Ken Paxton, who just won his Senate primary against John Cornyn, because the Trump administration blessed Ken Paxton. So they were confronted, and they decided to respond. No tears for Cornyn, absolutely not.
To know a little bit more about the Thomas Massie loss, and what's your thoughts on that?
I got so many thoughts. It's interesting, David. I've been accused, I think the organization's been accused, Erica's been accused of betraying Charlie by not coming out and endorsing one way or the other and not being more involved in that race. I will tell you, and I haven't said this publicly, but and I know this isn't necessarily a question, but it's an opportunity to address it. But, after the One Big Beautiful Bill vote, and I want to respect Charlie's privacy as well. It's always the tension in all of this. There's private conversations. Charlie was a fan of Thomas Massie, especially historically, liked him on war, liked him on being a budget hawk and spending. But he was pretty frustrated that Massie didn't vote in the affirmative on the Big Beautiful Bill.
Now, anybody who knows anything about the really big, beautiful bill that we put together, this was as much a corporate giveaway as any bill that you will ever see. And if there's one thing that we know about Charlie Kirk, is that he was a true believer. He had very strong conservative Christian libertarian principles that he fought to build his organization around. Now, of course, as Jen and I have pointed out, he eventually woke up one day and realized he was never in control. It was not his to control. Once they realized how to use him, they used him until he started asking questions, and then he had to be told how things really are, and he decided that he wasn't going to be party to it. The idea that they want to denigrate him in death, and the fact that Erica knows that what they're doing is denigrating him in death, it's pretty sinister. and it's pretty evil. And as such, to suggest that Charlie lost interest of supporting Thomas Massie because he wouldn't support the big, beautiful corruption bill, yeah, I think that's probably a lie. Pretty big lie, by the way. But if you're going to lie, why lie small? You might as well go big or go home. As Hitler once said, the bigger the lie, the more people will be convinced it's the truth. And this is an example of whitewashing in the worst way. I highly doubt that Charlie Kirk was in support of the big, beautiful bill. Maybe he said he was. But when you really understand what the language was, you would understand why Thomas Massie was vehemently against it. And that's the difference between somebody who thinks and somebody who capitulates and goes along to get along. And the average MAGA supporter today is nothing more than a pleb and an acolyte for the genocidal cause. Because they don't ask questions. They do believe in a monarch, or they at least believe in a dictatorship. Maybe they believe in a monarchy, I'm not sure. But in reality, even if an instinct is telling them that what they believe is wrong, they will never say it publicly. They will go right along with it because it's, again, the fish out of water problem. Somebody speaks up in a congregation. It isn't, oh, wow, that person really made a great point. Instead, that person is an evil, despicable heretic that must be silenced. And so in this case, they're being told through the pro-Israel money that now controls this organization, only use Charlie as we tell you to use him. Never reveal that Charlie was somebody different than the person you are now continuing to rewrite his history as well as his legacy. Not one that I necessarily agreed with. But this is an example of doing just that.
Because it was essentially the totality of President Trump's first-year agenda wrapped into one bill. And I will just say, privately, Charlie was really, really frustrated.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to put it. And I think he would have become more frustrated over the events of the past 9 months, which is, we liked what Massie said. We liked his libertarian credentials. We liked him making the debt clock that ran on the little
and I
lapel
still like
pin.
Massie.
And there's so many things to like about him, but he has, especially over the past few months, he's become the number one, let's put it, Republican gadfly, Republican who gets in Trump's way, criticizes Trump, and not just on debt or the war, but also on Epstein, saying that where there's this pedophile class that Trump is allied to, essentially. And I think Charlie would have been, as you said, very frustrated. He would have, and Charlie was not a guy who would feud publicly. He would have certainly been messaging Massie about that and being like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And he would have been very concerned with it.
Well,
we don't know exactly what he'd say.
Yeah, I don't know
but that's
either.
Us being honest about it.
Yeah, but I will.
There is nothing honest about what they are saying. If there is one thing that we hope to do with our channel, our small but mighty channel, it is to be a part of the effort to break Turning Point USA. And as JFK once said, splinter it into 1,000 tiny pieces into basically into nothingness. And that's what they deserve. And make no mistake, this is all done for money and power, for however long they can keep it going, because it's not going to last. Much like our broken system. Andrew Kolvet, Blake Neff, Erica Kirk, anyone that is under the thumb of Little Ben and his cohorts and any of the Zionist donor class They eventually will run out of real estate in terms of support for their organization. This won't last. Frankly, I think if Thomas Massie decided to start his own organization to rival Turning Point USA, he would draw millions of supporters in pretty quickly. Somebody has to create I don't want to say a mirror organization because that's not right. But you can take elements of what was working for Turning Point USA before they completely sold out and make it into your own by creating an organization that actually benefits everyday people in this country. They had a great setup, but they got greedy. So you don't actually need organizations like these. In fact, I don't even know what the hell they do now that is actually of any value. Do they just talk shit about Democrats or progressives? My guess is that that's probably all they do. It's like one big Libs of TikTok channel. So hopefully, sooner rather than later, they'll no longer be relevant. May it happen sooner rather than later. Now, as you know, we like to have fun here. It can't be all dreary and dreadful and nothing positive to talk about. But I got to tell you guys, I take solace in the fact that in times of great peril, sometimes there is a bright light of positivity, which leads us to IDF soldier Rotem Yanai, I guess is how you say her now deceased name. I don't generally want to speak ill of the dead, but sometimes people just kind of get what they have coming to them. So I'm going to set the stage for this recent casualty of genocide. Here is what Rotem was doing as an IDF soldier.
Can you please make me omelet? With the onion? With onion? Onion. Petrozelia. Petrozelia? Okay. Petrozelia with the eggs, yeah? Yeah. Yeah. 2 eggs. 2 eggs? Yeah. Okay. 1, 2. Salt? Yeah, salt.
So this video shows Israeli soldier who's no longer with us, Rotem Yanai, who was killed by a Lebanese drone yesterday along the border with Lebanon, preparing food in a manner intended to provoke Palestinians in Gaza during the height of the famine. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it seems to me that if somebody like Rotem was somebody who they needed to be serving in the Israeli offensive forces, she doesn't exactly look like she's soldier material. I don't want to rain on people for their physical makeup, but that person couldn't outrun a tortoise, much less be effective in any type of combat. So maybe this is a sign of how desperate Israel is getting in terms of the soldiers that they have to put in positions of combat. This would be one that is not very combat ready. So what does she do? I know it's cliche, but she's a cook. That's what she does. And clearly is not cooking the healthiest of food.
Okay, salt. And pepper. Pepper we don't have. Avocado?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vegetable, please.
Vegetable?
Yeah.
Tomato and camembert? Vegetable?
Yeah.
Tomato and camembert?
Yeah.
Okay. Cheese?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
please. A lot of cheese, please.
A lot of cheese. What is a lot?
I don't know why this image is coming in so poorly, but we'll try it again.
Mmm.
So delicious.
Okie dokie, petrozelli.
God damn, Johnny. Good reference there, hot dog.
It's battable.
I'm also drinking some coffee.
And me coffee.
Now, I can't say for certain if this lady met the end of a drone bomb from Lebanon, but I can tell you that Rotem did. I mean, she is kind of an easy target.
Cheers. Yeah?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Omelette.
Yeah, omelette. Omelette.
Now, it is my understanding that this was being done in a tent very close to where many of the Palestinians are that are being starved to death. I don't care what you believe in or what you think you know about warfare, propaganda. They have no humanity. So when they get blown to smithereens, perhaps their whole genocidal nation will, I'm simply just not going to have sympathy for them. Because in the end, they will do it to all of us if they have to, in order to feel safe, of course. And while this is karma, it gets even better.
Omelette.
Yeah. Cucumber. Tomato.
Israel.
What is your name?
Rotem.
Rotem? Okay,
Yeah.
Rotem. Rotem. בתיאבון.
Give it to me, please. Oh, thank you, madame.
Now, of course, I can't show you her gargantuan frame getting ripped apart by a drone bomb. What I can show you is what genocidal tears look like in real time. This is her mother. She was a joyful soul. She's not saying what she was joyful about. Perhaps watching people get killed. All she wanted was to cook and eat. Well, she did a lot of both. And clearly, it appears that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Who knows how many people this woman, and yes, she is a woman, how many people she was responsible for killing. We only look in this one specific instance, and the reactions of the Israeli people losing their minds that this woman was taken away from them. But how many Palestinian children did she adjacently starve to death? Cooking all this food could have helped these kids, could have shown a shred of decency for humanity, but clearly has none. And now they are all reaping what they sow.
שלא ייגמר לעולם, שאני צריכה לקבור, שלא בדרך הטבע. את הדבר שהכי יקר לי, אני אוהבת אותם יותר משמילים יכולות להביע את החזרי לנו מאוד. זה יהיה חלל שלא יהיה ניתן למלא.
Talk about disconnected from reality. But hey, I hope, because there are those out there that will say, you shouldn't celebrate any death. And it's not that I'm celebrating it. I'm just merely pointing out the reality of what actually happened. That small glimpse of that woman's inhumanity when she was cooking that food is beyond proof positive that she is a genocidal murderer. And genocidal murderers should be dealt with accordingly. And so she was. There are many more to go. And there are many more that will bite that bullet. Or in this case, a drone. I would definitely agree with you, Splash. I play this because sometimes you need to be reminded that there is karmic aligning justice in the universe. Now, again, all jokes aside, I did say that she was way too big of a target for a drone to miss. Now, on the one hand, that's considered a good quip of humor, but it's also true. The bigger you are, the easier you are to spot. And the easier you are to hit. And she got hit. And that, in many ways, is justice. This was a person who not only was eating herself into oblivion, but was doing it with a big smile on her face, knowing that those that desperately and truly needed that food were not getting it. So as I said, she was contributing to the genocide in a very profound way because, as Jen has pointed out many a times, the famine and the starvation is the biggest killer of them all. You can run away from bombs, not forever, but you can't run away from your inability to eat food and drink water. When that's taken away from you, you're on borrowed time. So there's no question that this woman had a hand in many deaths. And yet the disconnect with the Israelis is that she's the victim. No. We are all victims of this genocidal ideology. And as Americans, we better get our minds right about what we need to do in order to break this stranglehold. Rest in piss, you disgusting wench of a now deceased, not so human being. With that being said, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I know I did. I actually think I did pretty good tonight. I felt pretty good about these conversations. And if you are here, well, we're conversing with the audience too, you know. We are having conversations. They're not being excluded. We like to highlight the importance of everybody being involved. And that includes our patrons. Big shout out to Mark J. It's great to see you, pal. Thank you for the $5. The man who likes everything gold-plated will be disappointed when he finds that the gates to hell aren't. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mark. It's good to see you, buddy. Robin in the Hood. Good to see you. Thank you for the $1.99. Keep going. Thank you. Thank you for your very generous support. Citizen Pendejo with the 20 pesos. Can't fathom why U.S. men ain't defending their women. We are a very sad sack of a society in many ways. Melissa Miners with the $5. Did you see the neighborhood named after Trump in Is Not Real by the Syrian border? No, but thanks for pointing it out. I'd rather not see it, but perhaps that's a talking point for Monday. We will soon know. Wolfenstein's with the $10. Good to see you, pal. Hollywood, mainstream media, sports, all in on promoting Zionism. Well, you couldn't be more right, because they do control these levers of power. Look at the majority of owners in sports and in music, entertainment. Who are the owners? That always tells the story, and it always will. Citizen Pendejo with the 20 pesos again. American have metal. We are itching to rise. We're trying to. We're doing the best we can. Aaron Wolf with the $5. I'm broke. So why'd you give me $5? I appreciate it, buddy. And I know all of that is to help get our message out there, and we really appreciate it. But if you're struggling financially, do not donate to our channel. Being here, liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting on clips, that is more important than anything else that you can do, especially if you're struggling financially. So bear that in mind, and we do appreciate your support. Libertarian Social Dem with the $4.99. I just spoke with my friend in Colombia, and he asked me who should he vote for. I told him as a necessity vote for the current anti-Zio government. I would say the same for anybody who's thinking about who they should and shouldn't vote for. Just find out who they're financed by and who they're supporting. You'll very often get the answer you're looking for. And that's the essence of why we do what we do. It is our job to get the message out there as best we can. And if we do, we're providing a service that I think is helpful. This is not our life's work, but it's part of our involvement in the political arena, which is 1,000% necessary because, as the old saying goes, either you do politics or politics is going to do you. Decide. Well, we certainly have. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We love you all. We appreciate you all. Jen and I will see you Monday, and free Palestine. Good night, guys.